All right, so now let's talk about some of the characteristics of life, right? We're talking about anatomy and physiology. So basically, we're talking about what it takes to keep a body functioning, right? A body healthy and functioning. And so here are some of the characteristics of life. So this is what defines a living thing, right? So definitely, things have to grow and develop. And think of a human, right? Because a lot of the, or most of this class, that's what we're going to be talking about is a human body. So growth and development, right? We start off as an embryo, like we talked about earlier. Well, if you want to get more specific, we start off as a gamete from the father and the mother, come together as an embryo. That embryo starts to divide. So it goes from one cell to two cells. Those two cells go to four cells and eight cells, 64 cells, and they just keep growing and developing. Then you have like a newborn, an infant, a toddler, eventually becomes a teenager, a grown adult, right? So there is definitely growth and development. We'll go this way, we'll go counterclockwise. And so responding to the environment, right? As a living thing, you respond to the environment. If you touch a hot surface, you're going to respond to that by moving your hand backwards, right? If someone shines a bright light in your face, you're going to respond to that by either closing your eyes, blinking them, or your pupil changing. When you're talking about what we're made of, we are made up of cells, right? Cellular structure and composition. All living things are made up of cells. We have all different kinds of cells in our body, from bone cells, muscle cells, all of these different kinds of cells make us who we are, right? Then metabolism. Metabolism, I'm sure you've heard people say, oh, I have a fast metabolism, I have a slow metabolism. Basically, metabolism is just your body building up and breaking things down, right? You eat food, your body breaks them down and releases energy, gets rid of the waste, but then it takes parts of that food that you eat and it builds it up into the parts of your body that you need to build up, right? So that is metabolism. Homeostasis is basically means keeping stable inner conditions. That means having balance, right? Your body cannot get too cold or you can die. Your body cannot get too hot or you can die, right? Your body has to stay within a certain temperature. And usually we'll say that it's 98.6 degrees for humans, but that changes throughout the day depending on the time of the day and things like that. But basically, homeostasis means you have to have a balance in your body or you will uh, be ill, you'll be sick, or eventually you could die from that, right? Heredity. So, heredity right here, heredity of traits basically means that your parents pass down some traits to you, right? Some of us are light skin, dark skin, tall, short, curly hair, straight hair, blue eyes, brown eyes. All of these things are traits that were passed down from our parents, which they got from their parents and they got from their parents, right? So that is heredity right there, basically passing down traits. And this shape back here that you see kind of spiraling, that's DNA. That's basically where we get all of these traits from. Our parents pass down their DNA to us, we pass it down to our children, and so on and so on, right? And then reproduction. Living things reproduce and have offspring. Offspring just means the babies that they have, right? So reproduction is just one of those things that living things do in order to have the next generation of, it's like almost a copy of themselves, right? So you were a copy, almost a copy, right? Half from your mom, half from your dad. Same thing with them and your grandparents and your great grandparents, right? They're all reproduced to produce the next generation of offspring. So, to survive, humans also need oxygen. Oxygen is a key component of the chemical reactions that keep the body alive, right? So, here you see what's called the mitochondria. When you breathe in oxygen, you're basically using it right here. The mitochondria is using it. And the mitochondria is what they call it, the powerhouse of the cell, which means it's where cells get their energy to do things, right? So, you need that oxygen to come in through you breathe it in, it goes through your body and it's using your mitochondria, right? So nutrients right here, you see you have proteins, carbs, fats, nutrients. This is what it is. This is what nutrients are. Substance in foods and beverages that are essential to human survival, right? So without these things right here, you could not be a healthy person, right? You kind of need to have a balance of these nutrients, right? Or not necessarily a balance. Some of them are better for you than others, and it also depends on the type of diet that you need, right? So this is what humans require to survive. We also have a narrow range of temperatures that we need to survive, right? I mentioned this earlier. You get too cold, you die. You get too hot, you die. So chemical reactions upon which the body depends can only take place within that certain narrow range of body temperatures, right? From just below to above 37 degrees Celsius, or like I said earlier, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So your body does its best, the best that it can to keep you within a certain temperature. You get too hot and you start to sweat. That sweat, every time sweat evaporates off your body, it takes a bunch of heat with it. So sweating is almost like your air conditioning for your body, right? And then if you get too cold, your body does what they call shiverogenesis, which just means your body shivers, right? And that shaking, that shivering, what it's doing is it's creating body heat, right? So it's raising the temperature. Atmospheric pressure, I think I mentioned this earlier too. It does more than just keep blood gases dissolved, right? Your ability to breathe, take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide, it also depends on a precise atmospheric pressure, right? And here you see over here, these are the lungs over here, expanding. But if you are at the wrong atmospheric pressure, that cannot happen, and you can actually die from that, from being in atmospheric pressure that is not meant for humans to live. Right? Some things can live. There are some fish that live way deep under the ocean, but if we try to do that, our bodies are not used to that, and we would die. Right? And so these are just some more requirements for living. And so this I've mentioned a couple times before: homeostasis. Right? Homeostasis is just any self regulating process by which an organism tends to maintain stability while adjusting to conditions that are best for its survival. Basically, it's just saying you have to have some kind of biological balance, right? Whether you're talking about right here, your fluid levels, your body temperatures, your blood sugar, if any of these get too high or too low, that can cause serious illness to this person, or eventually it can lead to death, right? Homeostasis is normally maintained in the human body by an extremely complex balancing act, right? So there are a lot of things that go into keeping your body homeostatic, right? In this state of homeostasis, a lot of things go into that, and we'll get into that as we go on. Regardless of the variable kept within its normal range. So again, that variable can be fluid levels, body temperature, blood sugar. Maintaining homeostasis requires at least four interacting components, right? So there are four things that ensure that homeostasis is happening. So one of those is a stimulus, right? A change in internal conditions, which is measured by the variety of receptors. So let's talk about that stimulus as being heat, right? You're somewhere and it's just very hot. You're in a room and there's no air conditioning and it's 90 degrees in that room. That is a stimulus, right? And your body is going to react to that. Then you have a sensor, right? Monitors the values of the variable and sends data on it to the control center, right? So again, your body or your skin is picking up this heat and maybe the humidity, right? The moisture in the air, and it's monitoring that, and it's in your body. It's sending those messages to your body like, this is not comfortable. This is starting to get unbearable. It is causing my body to it's causing me pain sometimes, right? If it's too hot. The control center matches the data with the normal values. If the value is not at the set point or is outside that normal range, the control center sends a signal to the effector. All right. So again, the control center, right? That is the part that is going to say, wait a minute, I need to be living at this certain temperature, 98.6 degrees, but I am not there right now, right? My body is going above that temperature. And so it is not within the normal range. So I'm going to send this message over here, this signal to the effector. And then what the effector is, it's an organ, a gland, muscle, or any other structure that acts on the signal from the control center, right? So basically, it's the effector is a thing getting the message from the control center, and it acts on the signal to move the variable back to the forward set point, right? So I know that's a lot of definitions, a lot of words, but here is kind of not kind of. This is just a little diagram that kind of shows what's happening, right? You have the stimulus. In this case, body temperature exceeds 37 degrees Celsius, so it is getting hot, right? The sensor, the nerve cells on the skin and in the brain, those are the sensors right there. That's what's going to sense that it is too hot in here for my body. And then that sensor right there sends something to the control, and what that control is a temperature regulatory center in the brain. So that's a part of your brain that lets your body know, hey, this is a good temperature, this is too cold, this is too hot. That is happening in your brain, right? Your brain sends that signal to the effector, And that effector are the sweat glands throughout your body, basically saying, all right, turn on the sweat. We are too hot. We need to cool down, release the sweat so that this person's body can cool off when that sweat evaporates. Because remember, when your sweat evaporates, that evaporation takes a lot of your body heat with it. That's why when you're sweating and you're outside in the heat, you're sweating, you're hot, but then you go into the air conditioning. And if you're still sweating, your body, you're going to feel really, really cold in that air conditioning, right? Because all of that heat is leaving with your sweat. So we have what we call a negative feedback loop. In a negative feedback loop, a stimulation, a deviation from the set point. So again, you have a certain comfortable set point. Talk about body heat. If you get too cold, you get too hot, then you're leaving that set point, right? But again, it is the feedback loop is a stimulus, a deviation from a set point is resisted through a physiological process that returns the body to the homeostasis. Right. So again, this is the same example we were just talking about. And so what is happening is this feedback loop, something goes off and it's like, all right, we're getting too hot. We need to shut this down. We need to not keep going in the direction we're going. We are first okay, and then we got warm, and then we got warmer, then we got hot. Now we're getting hotter. Like this heat that our body is feeling, we need to shut that down. We cannot have the heat go up any higher in this body. And so this negative feedback loop starts working to shut down that heat, the rising of the heat, right? And it does that by releasing sweat through the body. And so this negative feedback loop, it shuts down that heat so that you don't have to worry about getting overheated anymore because of this feedback loop. The negative feedback loop shuts that down. On the other hand, instead of shutting something down like a negative feedback loop does, a positive feedback loop keeps it going, right? And so, in the case, an example that is commonly used for this is during normal childbirth, it's driven by a positive feedback loop, right? So, a positive feedback loop results in a change of the body status rather than returning back to homeostasis, right? So, right here, you have nerve impulses from the cervix transmitted to the brain, right? So that cervix is sending those signals. The brain stimulates a pituitary gland to secrete oxytocin. That oxytocin is then carried in the bloodstream to the uterus. That oxytocin stimulates uterine contractions and pushes the baby towards the cervix, right? So that baby needs to come out one way or the other. And when a woman goes into labor, that's what's basically happening, right? Is these contractions are helping her push and push and push until eventually the baby is pushed out of the woman's body, right? And here you see the head of the baby pushes against the cervix, and eventually this baby needs to be pushed out. So the contractions cannot stop until the baby is out, right? So instead of stopping contractions the way a negative feedback loop does, a positive feedback loop keeps it going and going and going until eventually those contractions and all that pushing helps get the baby outside of the body.